Welcome to For the Purpose Of, the podcast where we navigate the intersection of technology and the world of education. I am Sarah Wood, and today I'm joined by
Katherine Fredrickson
and Keith Tramper. This is our fourth episode in the AI series where we're breaking down some of the big ideas in AI. We've been working with educators on building foundations in AI, and we've crafted this series to help educators who may not be in the trainings that we're running. So today we'll be breaking down data privacy and security with AI tools. So we'll be looking at things like how educators can be good stewards of student data, Agentic AI and the privacy trade-off, and human dependency on AI.
So before we deep dive into these topics, let's talk about what we're possibly reading, listening to, watching. It doesn't have to be work related. Maybe you've got some fun things that you are watching at home or listening to. Anybody like to start us off?
I can start. I just finished the second book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. This is my total geek side. It's kind of a fantasy book, some of the magic and mystery kind of stuff. It's really cool. So been really into those, and I got one more book to go. As far as things that I've been watching, Shrinking has been one of my new favorite shows. It's an Apple TV show, and it's kind of, I don't know, just an interesting perspective on therapy and mental health, but just a lot of great comedy mixed in with it. And I don't know, just good, heartwarming stuff. It's kind of Ted Lasso-esque, if you would. So, and then the next thing I've got on my reading list here is the AI Assist Strategies for Integrating AI into the Very Human Act of Teaching. The title alone kind of struck me, so going to be checking that out and seeing what Nathan Langrad has to say about AI.
So, what's up on my list? Right now, I'm watching the show, or the series, I should say, This Is Us. Not a new series by any sense, but new to me because I think I finally just made the time for it. And let me tell you, it is a great series, but if you are a parent, it will absolutely destroy you on so many levels. But so good. It's so well done. And then as far as what I'm reading, I've actually watched the series, the Virgin River series, but now I'm reading the Virgin River book series, trying to catch up on all of that. And that was a Christmas gift that I have been binging those books, so it's great. And then professionally, I am reading The Generative AI Age by Elena Winnick, because we had heard some of her Students for Innovation speak in the fall at one of our REMC Ritz meetings, and it was just so powerful. I bought the book right away, and I'm finally getting a chance to dive into it.
Awesome. So right now I am finishing up Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. And I do have to say, after listening to him present at the AI Summit in Lansing, I can actually hear his voice as I'm reading the rest of this book. And it's very entertaining to me. So I really appreciate that.
So you're reading the book really fast.
I'm trying not to speed read, but yeah, so that's great. And then after the holidays, we talked about watching Red One, of course, with Dwayne Johnson, and I loved it. I love superhero things. It was totally up my alley, and I would totally watch it again. And it was just kind of a fun, just having all those creatures come to life, and it's a little surreal, but it was a lot of fun to watch. I currently am watching, I'm not sure if it's done, if there was the last show on TV or not, but High Potential. I'm not a big crime scene TV watcher, but I really got hooked into this. And it's about a single mom and a house cleaner named Morgan. And she helps solve crimes for the LAPD. And she's very stylish and whimsical. And so there's some humor to it too. So I got really lured into that one. And then also summertime is always Big Brother. I can't wait. I just love that show. And last year, actually, they had a strong AI theme. So who knows what's gonna be next summer coming up. So I look forward to that.
I didn't know Big Brother was still a thing.
Yeah. But it's like that summertime, like, how you wait for certain things to come out. So that's my,
Just got the summer vibes.
yes, it does.
And that is helpful on a day like today.
Yes, very much.
Rough weather here today.
Very cold out. Yeah. All right. So we're going to get into one of the topics that's been top of mind for us, and that is data stewardship, as we've been calling it. And that is how educators protect their students' information inside of AI tools. I think it's pretty pertinent because of the recent breach from PowerSchool. If you didn't know, that they basically had a pretty big breach of student information that was pulled out of their system over the holidays. So a lot of people are looking at just data privacy right now. So one of the things that strikes me around AI in this particular case is that there's an incentive for AI companies to kind of be the first on the market, right? When we think about AI, it's almost synonymous with ChatGPT, right? But ChatGPT is just one tool that's out there. It was just the first to the market. And I listened to this podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but Search Engine is one of my favorite to listen to. And they did an episode called "Should We Be Worried About OpenAI?" Obviously, from the title, you can tell that there's, some concern around OpenAI that they get into. But they also talk briefly about the story of how OpenAI was the first to the market and how Anthropic, who are the people that make Claude, this kind of took their time a little bit longer than OpenAI did. OpenAI came out in November. Claude came out in March of that following year. And OpenAI did that by skirting some of the ethical conversations and concerns around AI just to be the first on the market. So I think that's common in some of the AI tools that we have, unfortunately, and just kind of, makes me worry a little bit about where the privacy of our data is.
Yeah, and one of the things I'd like to hit on too is with the data stewardship and the privacy. Never give AI systems your personally identifiable information. I know we talked a lot about that in the past too in other podcast episodes, but the PII of your students should not be shared. There's privacy risks and data breaches like you talked about earlier. Losing control of some things that you share. I mean, once you share it's out there. So you just need to be very mindful of what you're putting into the systems. And then, of course, legal issues and biases and things like that. But some AI tools aimed at school use take steps to protect student data. So you can take a close look at the terms of service and their privacy policies as well. It's important to watch for disable data collection options on your favorite AI systems as well. And one tip I'd like to add is to try asking an AI tool to point out the important things for teachers to know in privacy policies and terms of service. So for example, if you have a tip about using ChatGPT or NotebookLM, you can drop it in the privacy policy and ask it what a teacher who is concerned about student data privacy should be aware of. So this is kind of a great segue, though, to Sarah's privacy and security check.
Yeah, it is a labor of love, I will say. But it's one of those things that I truly see the benefits and value, not just to us as EdTech consultants in our roles, but to any educator, any tech department, any administrator, anyone in the education system who's basically using AI. And what it is I've created a Google Sheet where I am doing some privacy and safety checks. And I kind of broke the tools that we've heard people using, or I've even received some feedback from some educators saying, hey, I'm using this tool. Could you add it to your list? So we have things such as teaching aids, learning aids, Gen AI tools, LLMs, things like that. And basically what we are doing is breaking down the privacy policies that are posted online, the terms of service, to try and get some answers on are these safe for educators to use, also safe for the different grade levels to use. And this really stemmed from a request that came from our first cohort of our AI for Educators, where we talk a lot about how AI can save you time. And it was kind of brought up, well, like, yes, it can save you time, but how can you help us save time as far as knowing which tools are okay to use? And we didn't have anything for that. And so that's where this kind of stemmed from, to be like, yes, like, we are here to support educators. We're here to help them save time, to empower and enable them. And if they just had a quick list that they could look at and be like, yes, I can use this, or no, I shouldn't, or you know what, I can use this, but maybe I need to do some additional research into why it's kind of recommended cautiously. So it is a growing list of resources, and I'm trying to poke away at them. And so, like I said, we have different categories, but then also broke it down by which tools are safe to use for educators, which ones for K-5, which ones for 6-8, and then 9-12. And I'm finding a surprising number of K-5 that are safe to use, but require parent consent. And it's explicit consent for that specific tool. So I appreciate that, because they're putting that student data and privacy first and want to make sure that parents are in the loop of that conversation. And it also does open up some different tools that are available for educators to use with students. I'm finding out that, 13 is that magic number. 13 and below are sometimes just a no-go. Some are 18 with consent or 16 with consent. And so it's kind of hard, and this is like what I struggled with when putting this together, when it comes to like age, specifically that 13. A student could turn 13 in 7th grade, they could turn it in 8th grade. And where do you draw that line? Even if 8th grade is the common year where they're turning 13, or 7th grade is, then what do you do if half the class is 13 and half the class is 12? And so I just had to make a decision and say, if it's a no, a lot of times it's because 13 and under is not allowed, because we live in the world, us ed techs, I should say, live in the world of equity. And is it equitable to say half the class can use it because of your age and the other half can't when you're learning the exact same content? It just seemed like it wasn't equitable to be able to allow that. So I just kind of had to make a decision, cut it off that way. But it's been very eye-opening to me what some of these tools have scored, and some tools that I was like, wow, this is a great thing. But privacy-wise, it ended up being really concerning. And so I'm no longer using it. And I really stand by the, when you know better, you do better. And I think there's a lot of opportunities through using this as a guide to know better, so that you can do better by your students, because their privacy is the utmost concern, and educators' privacy as well. So I hope this is a useful tool for people. We'll drop the link to this in the show notes. And like I said, I'm always open to adding new tools, or if you've heard about something and you're like, I've never heard of this, but my co-teacher is using it or whatever, I can happily add it to the list.
Yeah, I know that we've been invited into conversations between a tech director and a curriculum director, or teachers who want to use an AI tool, but the tech director is saying, no, that's not safe. And this tool that you've built, Sarah, is a really helpful thing to help bridge that gap, right? So it's very clear the way Sarah's got it spelled out on how many questions or how many points do you seek again?
I can't remember what the final number is off the top of my head. These were actually, I'm glad you brought that up. These were questions that I found through Common Sense Media's website that they made publicly available, what they are starting to use for their own privacy evaluations. So there's over 100 questions, and looking at some of them, an educator might be like, yeah, I get what they're asking, where others, tech directors, might look and be like, ooh, that's a huge priority, and teachers probably don't know what that means or why it should be considered.
Yeah. So I know your list kind of has a bunch of, yes, with caution or that sort of thing. And I think that really helps further the conversation around, okay, if this is allowed on our system, this kind of expectation or this kind of training needs to happen beforehand, right? Or it just helps make that conversation more productive. So thanks for doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the example of school AI being with caution for K-5 is what I kind of like to highlight because that is a unique tool and the fact that it's a lot of the way the educators are using it is for the chatbot feature that is built in there where you can customize that. Where, yes, it might be safe for students to use, but it would also be super important to do some pre teaching around what a chatbot is, how to engage, and things like that, and keeping on task. So there's a lot that goes into that conversation that you just can't necessarily just hand off to your students and say, go ahead and do. And so that's where that with caution comes in on a lot of them.
Yeah.
So with that being said about the privacy and safety checks, I think it really lends itself into conversation that goes around human dependency. Okay, so we have these tools that are safe to use, but how are we using? How are we depending on them? And I think there's already and will be more in the future an increasing integration of AI just across, various sectors, not just education, healthcare, business, finance, those kinds of things. And we need to realize and acknowledge that there are benefits and risks to using AI in any of those places. And so that's why it's really important to have that human in the loop and not be entirely dependent on AI. It also lends itself to really kind of going into those ethical considerations. Are you ensuring that the tools that you're using are fair, transparent, and accountable? So it really kind of just opens itself up for a need for ongoing dialogue and collaboration between all those in the conversation who are creating, using any sort of AI tool, and hold those businesses and creators accountable.
So just to reiterate, I just wanted to touch back on how AI will get better over time. So the more we influence it and more we put into the training data, the more we'll form it in the way that it needs to be. So part of the reason is being that human in the loop, like you said, Sarah, and that 80-20 rule is just so important. 80% AI, 20% human, that input that we put in really makes a difference. And AI will give you an answer even if it has to make it up. And this will get better over time. So humans need to influence it. The more positivity and accurate data that is put in, better data will come out. So part of the reason is this 80-20 rule and why it's so important. We put that 20% of us into it and we keep tweaking it as we go. And as we go, it should improve over time.
And I just want to tack on to what you said. I think unbiased data going into that system as
Correct.
well
Mhm.
is super important. And that's where that human influence really comes into that conversation.
Yeah.
So that we're providing it with unbiased data.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I'm glad you brought back some of the stuff we talked about in our last episode, because I think in the last episode we talked about that 80-20 rule being like, hey, double check your data, like you can't just accept it. And that's sort of what we're talking about here too when we talk about human dependency. Like we can't just trust every single thing that comes out of AI. We have to do the human work of using our judgment to help us with that. So I want to talk about a topic here that I've seen showing up more and more, and I kind of think we're heading towards a new wave of AI with agentic AI or just AI agents. If you haven't heard of these things, they are essentially like an AI assistant that can do some of the work on its own. It has some autonomy. So I remember Ron, when he was on the podcast, talking about how we could see a future with AI where it was developing a travel plan for you, right? And knowing where you want to go and knowing the kinds of things you like. That's an agentic AI. That's an example of one, right? Where it just kind of does some of that work for you. It books your trips. It plans your things. And I saw this article come across my feed the other day from Stefan Boschard. I think that's how you say his name. called AI Agents as TAs and Teachers, a call for thinking through opportunity and adaptation, where he sort of went through and detailed how an AI agent might look in a classroom supporting a teacher. So maybe while you're doing the lessons, you're instructing, you're working with students, it's in the background planning your next lesson or analyzing some data for you so that you can jump into small groups right after you're done instructing. You know, I'm excited for that, but at the same time, I think there's this certain level of balance that it strikes, right? Because in order to do that, it needs to know who your students are and what your curriculum is and who you are and your preferences. And you have to feed it a certain amount of data for it to be able to do what it needs to do. So I think we're going to wrestle with that for a while, especially as this next wave kind of hits and we start to see more of these AI agents showing up in places. An example of this too, as I was reading this article, I was thinking about the movie Her. Is that a movie you guys have seen?
No, I've not seen that.
I haven't, no.
So it's from 2013. It's Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. It's actually the source of the whole Scarlett Johansson, like suing, I think it was ChatGPT for using her likeness. It sort of came from that movie. And in the movie, Scarlett Johansson is an AI voice, and Joaquin Phoenix is using her AI voice in his ear all the time, and is going through a really bad breakup and trying to recover from that, and sort of falls in love with the AI. And it's a really thought-provoking, sort of touching movie. It's definitely worth a watch. It will give you feelings, and I'm not sure what kind of feelings that would be, if it's positive, negative, or just kind of uneasy. But it's definitely something to consider. And it's wild to think that was 10 years before this generation of AI really came about. So interesting. Anyways, so I think when we get into human dependency, I'm just going to come back to your initial question. Sorry for the bird walk. When we're talking about human dependency, we're talking about balancing this sense of overwhelm and the mental energy that's required of humans on a daily basis. It's a lot, right? We all feel that. We're balancing that and trying to allow AI to take over some of that work so we can get some of that energy back without losing critical aspects of human judgment, right? Without losing our humanness. So just to kind of draw parallels, you hear people talk about the calculator a lot. I was a former math teacher, so it's like interesting to come back to this. And granted, I wasn't even born when the calculator was like really introduced into math classes, really disrupting the way that math was taught. But essentially, when it came into being in classrooms and became popular and accessible, it lightened that cognitive load of calculating, that calculating skill, right? It essentially reduced some of that overwhelm. So we could start to look at mathematics in deeper ways. So it really advanced the field of math and the way we teach math. It also leveled the playing field for a lot of students because not all of us have minds that are really good at calculating. So by giving us a calculator that can fit in your pocket and reducing that cognitive load around calculation, now your average student, your low performing student might be able to go further. I think a lot about like long division, right? Like we could not have to focus on the process of long division and focus more on what that means, your numeracy skills, if you will.
I love how you mentioned that about the calculators, because I think back to when I was more so in high school, just a few years ago, was that we were asked to have our own calculator. And I think this is where like I see the parallel in my mind with AI is, there was a recommended calculator. At that point, mostly what we needed was graphing calculators. And, just a few years ago, they were really expensive. Just kidding. It was more than a few years ago when I was in high school. they were really expensive, and not everyone could afford to have the same calculator to do the work that was assigned or that you were learning. And so I think that's where I think about this, is because a lot of classrooms went to having classroom sets of calculators or calculators you could take home kind of thing. And we have that same conversation around access and equity when we're talking about these AI tools. And I think this is like kind of that modern day calculator that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember too, not too long ago, Sarah, that even if you, families or individuals that couldn't purchase them because they were very expensive. I know that equity piece about just the availability. Libraries, but you could even sign them out like a book. So it was kind of like, if you need a calculator, yeah, come sign it out, take it home, return it when you're done. But I found it made it very easy accessible for those that needed those things. So it
Mm-hmm.
worked well.
Yeah. And, I mentioned the balance, right? Like there were so many good things that came out of that. But I think at the time you could argue that students were losing some of those skills, right? They were losing some of that skill of calculating by hand and understanding how to manipulate numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, something probably was lost there. I mean, we're 50 plus years removed from that now, and I don't think we're really grieving the loss of that so much these days.
And I just want to clarify, it was not 50 years ago that I was in high school. But I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned earlier, like the whole, I don't know, parallel, I guess, to some of these AI tools. Like one that stands out to me a lot is Grammarly, just because I'm using it on a daily basis. If you're not familiar with how Grammarly works, it essentially is like a spell checker on steroids. It really allows you to transform your writing from kind of average writing into much more clearer communication, much clearer tone. It helps you rephrase things, right? So it lightens that cognitive load of, am I saying this right? Do I need to painstakingly go over this hard email over and over and over until I've got it at a place that I'm comfortable with? It really helps you get there quick. So again, it sort of levels the playing field. So people that struggle to communicate clearly, like Grammarly is a great tool because it really helps you transform that. And yeah, you might be losing some of that like skill set around sentence structure maybe, or tones, or paraphrasing or rephrasing. But I wonder, 50 years from now, are we going to be in the same place as we are now with calculators? Like, are we going to mourn the loss of that skill because there's something that can follow us around and help us with that all the time? I don't know. I think it's an ethical thing that we need to jump back to and really consider moving forward with AI. But at least right now, I think the equity and just mental capacity, mental load outweighs that. So
As you were saying that, I had like a flashback to elementary school, which now seems like was 50 years ago. I remember diagramming sentences on the
Yeah.
chalkboard,
I remember
and we would spend, it felt like weeks diagramming sentences. And I couldn't tell you to this day, other than the fact that we did diagramming sentences, that impacted me, which just makes me think, like, how impactful was that at that point in, learning about the structure of the English language, where, or maybe it's just ingrained in me and now I don't think about it. And that just makes me think about what this is going to be like in the future through tools like Grammarly.
Mm-hmm.
I have a funny little add-on to that, Sarah, because grammar, we weren't taught a lot of grammar in ELA and when we were in elementary school. But we, being Canadian, we learned French as a second language. And I remember learning sentence structure in French. So sometimes I catch myself thinking about a phrase and I will translate it into French to figure out what the parts of speech are. So, and then flip it back to English. It's very interesting and very kind of different, but it's true because we focused a lot on pronouns and verbs and all those things. And so, yeah, I do that little mini translation in my head, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's what that is.
My own kiddos are in Spanish immersion, and they have some of those kind of, for lack of a better term, brain farts kind of thing, because they're in the Spanish language all
Mhm.
day, and then they come home and they're in English, where the sentence structure of Spanish is different than English. And so they will use that structure sometimes in their English language, and then they usually catch themselves right away going,
Yeah.
"That's not right.
No,
That was Spanish structure."
I totally like understand that though. That makes complete sense to me. But yeah, that's great. Well, with that being said, we are going to take a quick pause. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more insights after this short break.
Let's dive right in. We got some interesting stuff to unpack today.
The REMC Podcasting Challenge.
REMC.
It stands for Regional Educational Media Center Association of Michigan.
Gotcha.
And they're all about supporting educators and students, with media stuff.
Makes sense.
And this contest is just one of the things they do.
Cool.
So back to the challenge. It's open to 5th to 12th grade students in Michigan.
Pretty wide range.
Yeah, and they can basically create any kind of podcast they want.
No theme.
Nope, just got to be 2 to 5 minutes long.
That's it.
Pretty much. Submit it online by January 31st, 2025.
Okay, so plenty of time.
And the best part,
What's that?
the winner gets some awesome podcasting equipment.
Whoa, that's a great prize.
I know, right?
They have a ton of info on their website.
Yeah.
Plus all that social media we talked about.
Mhm.
Oh, and don't forget that list of past entries.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Could be a great source of inspiration.
Yeah. Totally.
So go check it out, get inspired, and maybe even start your own podcasting journey.
That's what I'm talking about.
You never know what amazing things you might create.
Exactly.
Hey there, PDXers. This episode's podcast PDX question is, what is one thing from this episode that's sticking with you? How is it affecting how you're feeling about AI? Submit your response for sketches at bit.ly/FTPO PDX.
Welcome back, friends. We are going to continue with our podcast PDX community, and we have a friend, Sonali, who writes, I am very concerned about AI deepfakes and disinformation because it is getting harder and harder to spot them against all the information that comes in at us on a daily basis. I think about all of us with our different devices and all the scrolling that we do on those devices. Are we really paying attention to what we are looking at? How much of it are we unconsciously taking in? And if we spot a deep fake or disinformation, do we know what steps to take to report it? Is reporting even an option? This is where I am being very vulnerable and do not know the answer to my own question. Well, thank you, Sonali, for submitting that comment for us to talk about today.
So my first thought, and I'm going to have to look up the article where I read it, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, was that there are 11 million bits of information that we as humans absorb each second, that are coming at us each second. But our brain can only analyze like 40 to 50 of those at a moment. So you're thinking like all your senses, like processing people talking, their body language, all those kinds of things. And that made me think of this because there is so much information that's coming at us, not just on a daily basis, but depending on what we're doing, even within those seconds. And it is so hard to tell. And if our brain can only take in like 40 to 50 of those pieces of information at a time, it's pretty wild at how we can discern some of these AI images. And I think when we talk about deep fakes too, it's not always just the image or just the video kind of thing. And people can manipulate text in certain ways to make you believe things. And I think Sonali just brings up a great point because I think because AI is still kind of considered in its infancy, that it is hard to, spot those deep fakes and disinformation and misinformation sometimes. And there aren't necessarily steps in place currently for what you do to report it other than reaching out to like published authors or wherever you spotted that information, but that's not always guaranteed that they'll respond or something will change from that.
Yeah, I think of that, taking everything with a grain of salt. It's hard. Unfortunately, there's good and bads, right? And it's distinguishing what is meaningful to us. And I think also, like, when you're looking at, whether, you're scrolling on your phone or you're on the internet or wherever you're looking at, like, you're going to pay attention to things that pertain to you, and you're going to focus on the things that most represent you. But then again, it's like, how real is this? Is this real information? Am I actually gaining from all this information? And it's kind of like, it really kind of questions a lot of things. And so for myself, I just tend to think about, what, this might not be real. What if it's not real? Like, what is the validity of this? So it's just one thing I always keep in the back of my head. It's really, really hard to distinguish sometimes.
Yeah. I think you're both talking about our own capacity to recognize false information or faked information, right? And in some cases, it just is easy to skip past that because it's a confirmation bias. I think, like what you're saying, Katherine, like we were expecting that, it aligns with what we view.
Yeah.
So we accept it, and we move past it. And to your point, Sarah, like, hey, I've only got so much brain power. And typically, I don't know about you guys, but for me, if I'm scrolling through social media, it's because my brain needs a break. Like, it needs to tune out the rest of the world. Why I go to social media, I don't know, because that's the worst place to do that. But, so it may be 40 to 50 things, like you said, but at that point, it's like 2 things for me. So, I'm not doing it my due justice. So,
I found that article, it was actually through NPR, that really just validates what you just said there, Keith, and that said, 11 million bits of information each second, but our conscious minds can only handle 40 to 50 bits of information a second. So our brains sometimes take a cognitive shortcut that can lead to unconscious or implicit bias. And it talks about serious consequences for how we perceive or act towards other people, which is exactly what happens when we think about with AI. So it really comes back to what happens in that unconscious, which is fascinating. So our own unconscious biases could really lend itself to, this whole part of this AI conversation. And even if we're not aware that that's a bias that we have, it could be influencing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's almost like as a society, our brains are not developing at the same pace as the ability to make misinformation. It is becoming so easy to make mountains of misinformation, and our brains haven't adapted yet to be able to keep up with that and to recognize that. So it's an interesting question, Sonali, and I think you're not alone in asking these questions. We don't necessarily know all of the ways to go about approaching disinformation, but I hope some of the things we shared in that last episode that you were referring to really helped clarify some of that for you and hopefully guide you along the way as we move forward.
What do you think about this comment? We'd love to know. And don't forget to register to be a part of the podcast PDX community at bit.ly/FTPO PDX.
And that's it for this episode of For the Purpose Of. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this podcast, we'd love it if you'd share it with a friend.
Do you have a question? We'd love to hear it. Go to bit.ly/FTPOMAIL. You can reach out and find all things EdTech at bit.ly/IamEdTech. Catch you next time on For the Purpose Of.
This podcast is a service of Kent ISD and is produced by Keith Tramper, Sarah Wood, and Katherine Fredrickson. Edited by Keith Tramper. Original jingle music by Katherine Fredrickson. Our theme music is Neon Nights by Scott Holmes Music, and our ad music is Vienna Beat by Blue Dot Sessions.
There's always pros and cons to everything.
Yeah.
Why do the cons have to mess everything up?
Jerks.
You little jerk. I think it's Home Alone. Kevin!
Look what you did, you little jerk.
Yeah.
My line is from Elf. Sits on the throne of lies. Smell like beef and cheese.
Yeah, I like that one. You're not Santa.